Hello and welcome. This is class number 41 of the UPSC Mains Answer Writing Initiative. I hope you have been attending all these lectures and it is now much easier for you to write the answers for the UPSC Mains examinations. Every single evening at 7 p.m. we have this class where we try and decode a previous year question asked by the UPSC. Try to answer that question, see the structure of such answers, and then give your homework as well so that you can also try and see if you can write these answers. What do we have for you today? Let's see which question have been taken up. However, before that, as I always do, I like to remind you, if you are new here, if this is your first class, if you have not written an answer anytime and you don't know where to begin, I would highly advise you to go and see the first class of this series. I am giving the link of the playlist in the description of the video. Go to that playlist, go to class number 1, the first lecture. In the first lecture, we had discussed about the structure of the answer, how to write the introduction, what to write in the intro, what to write in the main body, conclusion. All these things have been mentioned there. Go and check that out as well. Now, let's see what question have we taken up. Today we have taken up a question from 2022 paper of GS2. The question was about one of the flagship schemes of the Government of India. The Gati Shakti Yojana needs meticulous coordination between the government and the private sector to achieve the goal of connectivity. Discuss. Now, in these kind of questions where they're asking you to discuss, comment, things like that, it means they are not specifically asking you. For example, they are not asking you how coordination will be done. They are not asking you what will be the cost of the coordination. They are not asking you any specific thing. They have just given a statement that coordination between private and the government sector will be good. It will help us achieve the goal of connectivity. Fine. After that, they're not asking, they're just asking you to discuss. Means elaborate a bit more on that, how will it work. So in these cases, what do you have to do? What exactly do you have to write? So basically, first thing that you have to understand here, you have to tell about how the coordination will be helpful, and then maybe you can give a contrasting view about how there are still limitations. It's easier to say that you can coordinate, but there are still certain limitations between the possible coordination between the government and the private sector. So in these kind of questions, when they are not specifically pinpointing you a specific question, you have to elaborate on the given statement. That is how you can basically answer, discuss or comment type question. Now, what exactly is the PM Gati Shakti Yojana? I hope most of you know. So this is a very optimistic government scheme, or a very huge government scheme, mainly about coordination between different ministries. I'll give a very simple example. Let's try and understand this in simple terms. All of you would have seen nearby where you live or in your city somewhere, there is a road that is dug up for whatever infrastructure reasons. Then they make the road, proper road is made, you are very happy. After 2 months, they again dig up the road. And you are left wondering, why are they digging up the road every 2 months? So what happens in some cases, let's assume that in the first instance when the road was dug up, they were basically putting swivel lines. So once the swivel lines were put in, then they made the road. After 2 months, some other ministry realized, oh, we also have to put in gas pipeline. So now it is their responsibility, they will dig up the road. Once that is done, maybe a third ministry will realize, oh, we also had to do something underground, so they will now dig up the road. Why it happens is there is no coordination amongst the different ministries. Every ministry is working on its own, they are just doing their own job, rather than coordinating with others that do you also have some work to do under this road, let's do it together. To solve that issue, PM Gati Shakti Yojana is launched. What I have given you is a very simple basic example, but this happens on a much larger scale. And when it happens on these larger scales, the amount of money that is involved is humongous. So huge sums of money is involved here, and that is why it has to be looked into. So let's start with the introduction. We'll write a fact about how the PM Gati Shakti Yojana basically started, when it started. Launched in 2021, it's a national master plan for multimodal connectivity to incorporate various infrastructure schemes, such as government schemes that include the ports also, that include waterways also, it includes airports as well. Under this program, 100 critical infrastructure gap projects have been prioritized in financial year 2024. with an allocation of 75,000 crore rupees. So this is basically the introduction part. As you know, in the introduction, either we write about a fact or a definition. Since it's not a question where you have to define something, we'll start with a fact about this PM Gati Shakti scheme. Main body, again, the question was about better coordination between government and the private sector. So now the better coordination will lead to what? Very generic, better planning execution, much better interaction which lead to having projects being prioritized. For example, again, now private sector has come in a lot of different ways. For example, in a lot of Indian cities, the electricity distribution company, DISCOMs, are now private sector enterprises. So they put up all that electricity infrastructure. So if they have to put up that infrastructure, they have to coordinate with the government ministry who is doing a similar kind of a job there, so that they can divide their responsibility, they can prioritize certain projects. They can identify critical gaps in planning and funding, reduce time also. When you are in touch with the ministry, when you're working with them, you can ensure that the clearances for certain projects are given on time, sharing of data also to have much better infrastructure. This is how better coordination between the two sides, private sector and the public sector, can benefit. On the other hand, there are some other benefits attached to it. Reduce delay, avoid duplication of work, as I told you, having much better technology, much better service delivery, last mile connectivity, and overall a much better customer experience for the common man. On the other hand, there are some limitations, and we'll talk about that. Limitations, for example, very heavily centralized. When a private sector company works with the government sector works at its own merry pace. There is a lot of bureaucratic hurdles. They don't work by basically passing files overnight. They take their own sweet time. And most of the decisions are taken in a very centralized manner. So at the central authority, most of the decisions will be taken, and then the ministry will have to abide by that. So it's highly centralized. Then there is a role of agencies such as Gram Sabha, etc., which have to give approval before any development work can take place in tribal areas. So that also delays these projects. Environmental clearances also have a major role here, because they also delay certain projects. And coordination, as I said, between government and the public sector, in the private sector, is not easy, because the way of their operation is very different. You cannot even compare the private sector and they're working with the government sector. It's very, very, very different from each other. All these thus are limitations that we have seen between coordination of the government and the private sector. And then we'll conclude it by just writing that success of this project can play a very, very important role in India's goal of achieving $5 trillion economy. That's how we can conclude this particular answer. And now it's time for you to put on your answer writing cap and write this answer. It's a question specifically from IR. Investigate the origins of the Kachadivu Island conflict and assess its effects on fishing communities and the relationship between India and Sri Lanka. It was a topic that was in the news before the elections. The Prime Minister talked a lot about the Kachadivu Islands, accusing the previous governments of handing over the Indian territory to some other country. That is what the question has been, or that is what the question is in context to. Try and write this answer. You can email this answer to me. I'll be happy to give you a feedback as well. Thank you so much for joining in. Do join the Telegram channel to get PDF of all these classes. The link for Telegram channel is in the description of the video. Thank you so much. Bye-bye. Jai Hind.